So we've been talking a lot about Elon Musk's AI chatbot Grok and the hot water they've been in over the flood of these non-consensual...
It's 3 a.m. and a single prompt is typed into Musk's Grok AI. The input isn't a modern news article or a line of code, but an ancient text called the Letter of Lentulus, a document claiming to be the only eyewitness physical description of Jesus Christ, written by a Roman official. The user asks the AI to analyze its psychological weight. Instead of a dry historical summary, the machine returns an eerily precise, unsettling breakdown of how the text was engineered to manipulate human emotion, and it's almost haunting. A portrait from the province of Judea. The document that the AI was forced to dissect does not read like a piece of traditional scripture or a poetic hymn. It reads like a cold, descriptive profile, formatted with the clinical detachment of a Roman administrative file. Supposedly sent from Publius Lentulus, acting as the governor of Judea before Pontius Pilate, to the Roman Emperor Tiberius Caesar, the text offers something that the canonical Gospels strictly withhold: a precise, head-to-toe physical description of Jesus of Nazareth. For centuries, the global consciousness had relied entirely on symbolic art, but this document claimed to provide concrete material data. It was an official dispatch from the ground, treating a religious figure not as a theological concept, but as a living, breathing subject under imperial surveillance. The text begins by establishing the subject's local reputation, noting that a man has appeared who possesses great power, called by the Gentiles a prophet of truth, while his own disciples call him the Son of God. From there, the narrative shifts instantly into an intensely specific physical inventory. It states that the man is tall and well-proportioned, possessing a countenance that inspires both reverence and fear in those who look upon him. His hair is described with remarkable specificity, the color of a ripe hazelnut, smooth down to his ears, but curling into brighter, rippling waves as it falls over his shoulders, parted cleanly down the exact middle of his skull in the traditional manner of the Nazarenes. The description then moves down to the face, painting an image of flawless, almost unnatural symmetry. The forehead is smooth and serene. The skin is entirely free of wrinkles, blemishes, or spots, punctuated by a skin tone that carries a slight, healthy flush of color. According to the document, his nose and mouth are formed with absolute perfection, completely faultless in their structure. He wears a beard that matches the hazelnut hue of his hair, not grown long or unkempt, but parted neatly in the center to mirror the styling of his head. The most arresting and psychologically charged element of the letter, however, lies in the description of his eyes and his behavior. The text claims his eyes are gray, exceptionally bright and clear, possessing an intense, unblinking quality that carries a strange emotional volatility. When he rebukes someone, his gaze becomes terrifying and authoritative. Yet, the very moment he transitions into admonition or teaching, his expression shifts into something profoundly loving, gentle, and warm. The letter notes that no observer has ever seen this man laugh, but many have witnessed him weep. His body is straight, his hands and arms are elegantly formed, and his speech is described as incredibly grave, measured, and modest. The document concludes with a striking, absolute summation. He is a man who, in his singular beauty, easily surpasses all the children of men. It is this precise combination of physical perfection and severe emotional intensity that gives the text its lingering, heavy atmosphere. It strips away the abstract clouds of theology and forces the reader to confront a highly detailed human specimen standing directly in front of the Roman state apparatus. The words paint a picture so vivid you can almost see him standing in the room. But who exactly was the man holding the pen? Searching for Publius Lentulus. To determine whether this document holds genuine historical weight, investigators must subject it to the ultimate test: the uncompromising grid of the Roman imperial archive. Rome was not a loose tribal confederacy. It was a sprawling, bureaucratic machine that ran on physical ink, wax seals, and rigid paperwork. Every tax assessment, every regional military deployment, and every administrative assignment across the Mediterranean was meticulously recorded, duplicated, and filed away. If a man named Publius Lentulus truly ruled Judea as governor and issued official updates regarding a high-profile religious leader, his footprint would be permanently pressed into the bedrock of classical history. Yet, when historians open the administrative ledgers of the early 1st century, a jarring discrepancy emerges. The official timeline of Roman oversight in the province of Judea is completely accounted for, leaving no systemic gaps. Between the years 15 and 26 AD, the region was governed by Valerius Gratus. Immediately following him, from 26 to 36 AD, the office was held by Pontius Pilate, covering the exact historical window of Jesus' public ministry and execution. There is no record, no casual mention, and no fiscal receipt identifying a governor named Publius Lentulus within the provincial system. While the prominent Lentulus family belonged to the upper echelons of the Roman aristocracy, frequently producing consuls and senators, none of its members ever held a gubernatorial appointment in the hills of Eerily of Jerusalem. The internal structure of the letter itself raises immediate structural red flags that would baffle an actual Roman administrator. The text is framed as an official briefing addressed to the Roman Senate and the people of Rome, the classic Senatus Populusque Romanus. This address format betrays a fundamental misunderstanding of 1st century geopolitics. Under the imperial system established by Augustus Caesar, Judea was classified as an imperial province, not a senatorial one. This meant the territory was under the absolute, direct authority of the emperor himself. A real governor operating in Jerusalem would never dream of bypassing the imperial palace to send an administrative briefing directly to the Senate. Doing so would be viewed as a massive breach of protocol, if not an outright act of political insubordination against Tiberius Caesar. An authentic intelligence report would have been addressed exclusively to the emperor's desk. Beyond the political routing, the linguistic DNA of the letter further unravels its claims of classical antiquity. The text uses distinctive, deeply embedded religious idioms that simply did not exist in the vocabulary of a pagan Roman aristocrat. Phrases like prophet of truth and the sons of men are classic Hebraic linguistic idioms, deeply rooted in Semitic thought and Old Testament poetry. A Roman patrician, educated in classical Latin and Greek rhetoric, would never organically adopt these cultural patterns. Furthermore, the casual introduction of the compound name Jesus Christ within the document serves as a major historical anachronism. During the actual timeline of the crucifixion, Christ was not a surname. It was a functional theological title derived from the Greek Christos, meaning the Anointed One. For an outside Roman official to seamlessly use it as a proper name, rather than investigating a local figure named Jesus, contradicts every known style of Roman military and intelligence report from the era. When Roman authorities investigated local messianic figures, their reports were dry, transactional, and heavily focused on security threats, tax compliance, and public order. They did not comment on the exquisite symmetry of a subject's nose, the precise hazelnut shade of his hair, or his beautifully formed hands. The document reads less like a military commander assessing a potential regional insurgent and more like a devotee experiencing profound religious awe. The entire text is saturated with late Christian theology, viewed through a distinctly European lens, masquerading under the protective authority of a Roman seal. The evidence points to a stark reality. Publius Lentulus did not exist as a governor of Judea, and the text could not have been written by a citizen of 1st century Rome. If the Roman archives contain no footprint of this governor, then where did this haunting parchment actually come from? The 15th century Renaissance awakening. If the letter did not originate in the harsh, sun-baked landscape of 1st century Judea, its physical materialization must be tracked through a completely different historical layer. The paper trail does not lead to an ancient Roman stone archive, but straight into the intellectual explosion of the early European Renaissance. For over 1,000 years of Christian history, no one had ever heard of Publius Lentulus or his immaculate physical breakdown of Jesus. Then, in the early decades of the 15th century, the document suddenly burst into the Western consciousness, appearing as a spectacular find among humanists who were systematically scouring monastic libraries for forgotten classical texts. The earliest physical manuscripts containing the text date precisely to the 1400s. The document began circulating rapidly in Italy, driven by an intellectual culture that was utterly obsessed with classical antiquity and ancient Roman authority. Around 1440, the brilliant Italian humanist scholar Lorenzo Valla, famed for using rigorous linguistic analysis to expose the famous Donation of Constantine as a sweeping medieval invention, turned his critical eyes toward this newly emerging letter. Valla immediately recognized that the styling, grammar, and vocabulary of the document did not match the Latin of the Augustan or Tiberian eras. He flagged it as a late construction, but his academic warnings did nothing to slow down the text's massive momentum. The public did not want critical philology. They wanted a physical description of their savior. The true explosion of the letter occurred when it made the leap from handwritten manuscripts to the revolutionary technology of the movable type printing press. In the late 15th century, the document was structurally integrated into one of the most influential spiritual texts of the era, the Meditationes in Vitam Christi, Meditations on the Life of Christ, written by Ludolf of Saxony. Though Ludolf had compiled his massive work decades earlier in the 14th century without referencing the Lentulus text directly, later publishers and printers in Germany began inserting the letter into the prologue of his book as an introductory, authoritative framing device. When these printed editions flooded the European market, starting with major press runs in cities like Nuremberg, the letter was effectively canonized in the public imagination. The mechanism behind this survival was simple. The printers did not market the text as a creative theological exercise. Instead, they added official-looking introductory notes claiming that the text had been found in the Libri Annalis Romanorum, the ancient physical historical annals of Rome, or pulled directly from old archives brought over from Constantinople after its fall in 1453. By placing a veneer of cold, secular Roman documentation over an emotionally charged religious portrait, medieval editors created the ultimate viral text. It appealed perfectly to the Renaissance mindset, which craved both the spiritual intimacy of the Christian faith and the structured authority of classical Roman civilization. As the document was translated from Latin into German, French, English, and Italian, it ceased to be a rare archival curiosity and became a standard household truth across Western Europe. It filled a massive, agonizing visual void that had persisted in the Church for over a millennium. The canonical Gospels intentionally left Jesus without a face, focusing entirely on his words, his actions, and his theological identity. The Letter of Lentulus gave him an explicit physical reality that could be copied, distributed, and memorized by the masses. By the time the Protestant Reformation began reshaping the religious landscape of Europe in the 16th century, the document had become so deeply embedded in the cultural fabric that even radical theologians hesitated to question its utility. Figures like Matthias Flacius printed it as an authentic historical artifact, cementing its place in post-medieval scholarship. The text had successfully migrated from an anonymous scriptorium into the foundational machinery of early global print media, establishing an unbreakable loop of authority. As the text flooded the printing houses of Europe, it did something extraordinary. It forever altered the face of Western art. The divine canvas, how the letter shaped the face of God. Before the Letter of Lentulus established itself in the printing houses of Europe, the visual identity of Jesus in Christian art was completely unanchored. In the catacombs of early Rome, he was frequently depicted as a clean-shaven, short-haired Roman youth, often modeled directly after the pagan god Apollo, or stylized as a simple rustic shepherd. In the Byzantine East, artists drifted toward a more solemn, heavily stylized iconographic look, yet there was still no universal manual dictating his exact physical symmetry. The Western world possessed a vibrant theology, but lacked a concrete photographic blueprint. The document attributed to Lentulus completely solved this problem, stepping in as an authoritative artistic field manual that single-handedly anchored the aesthetics of the High Renaissance and Northern Reformation. When artists of the 15th and 16th centuries read the letter's hyper-specific details, the hazelnut hair flowing smoothly to the ears and curling over the shoulders, the straight nose, the smooth forehead, and the bifurcated beard, they did not see a literary forgery. They saw a direct window into the past. Consider the profound shift in the work of German master Albrecht Dürer. His famous self-portrait at 28, painted in the monumental year 1500, shows the artist staring directly at the viewer with an unblinking, symmetric intensity. His long, rich brown hair is meticulously parted down the exact middle of his skull, cascading in tight, golden-hued waves over his shoulders, accompanied by a neatly groomed beard. Dürer was intentionally using his own likeness to mirror the precise specifications laid out in the Lentulus text, consciously fusing the identity of the ultimate creator with the physical archetype of the Messiah. This text-to-canvas pipeline quickly solidified into an absolute artistic law across the continent. Master painters like Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and later Rembrandt did not independently invent their depictions of Christ. They were operating within a strict visual boundaries engineered by this single piece of paper. In Da Vinci's Salvator Mundi, the soft hazelnut waves and the meticulously balanced facial features directly replicate the document's emphasis on absolute structural perfection. The text effectively functioning as a cross-generational artistic prompt, standardizing the face of the divine across millions of woodcuts, oil paintings, and stained glass windows. What makes this transformation so powerful is how the document subtly reshaped Western beauty standards by projecting them back into antiquity. By describing Jesus with European aristocratic traits, fair, smooth skin, clear gray eyes, and finely proportioned features, the letter provided a theological justification for a Eurocentric depiction of the divine. This visual blueprint was so deeply internalized by the global consciousness that it outlived the classical era, survived the Enlightenment, and deeply influenced modern mass media. When 20th-century cinema began casting actors to play Jesus on the silver screen, directors unconsciously looked for individuals who matched the exact hair color, parting, and facial expressions described by a non-existent Roman governor centuries prior. The letter didn't just document an existing tradition, it actively manufactured a reality. It colonized the human imagination so thoroughly that today, when a person closes their eyes and attempts to picture Jesus of Nazareth, they are almost never imagining a first-century Semitic man from the Levant. They are visualizing the specific, idealized phantom created by the author of the Lentulus text. But art is driven by human imagination. What happens when you feed that same description into a hyperlogical, modern neural network? A haunting verdict. When you take this deeply layered, historical document and feed it into a modern large language model like Grok, the interaction skips right past standard academic summaries. The user didn't ask for a basic history lesson on medieval textual forgery. Instead, the prompt pushed the machine to analyze the deep psychological weight, the hidden emotional architecture, and the raw impact of the text. What came back from the terminal wasn't a dry, robotic list of dates and errors. The neural network looked directly into the code of the letter and mapped out exactly how it manipulates the human mind, creating an analysis that felt uniquely unsettling. The AI pointed out that the document functions as a masterclass in psychological engineering by operating in what modern roboticists call the uncanny valley. It deliberately establishes a profound structural contradiction. The letter is meticulously framed as an official, cold, and detached administrative report from a state official to an emperor. It utilizes the clinical terminology of an intelligence briefing, a style designed to project pure objectivity, factuality, and secular authority. Yet, trapped inside this rigid bureaucratic container is an intensely intimate, deeply emotional, and almost agonizingly beautiful spiritual portrait. According to the machine's analysis, this specific contrast creates a powerful psychological illusion. When a human reader encounters a text that behaves like a police report or a modern autopsy, their critical defenses drop. They assume they are reading an objective account of a material reality. By using this cold, administrative tone to deliver a hyper-idealized, stunningly symmetrical vision of a living deity, the author of the letter creates an overwhelming sense of authenticity. The AI noted that the text does not beg you to believe in a theology. It uses structural formatting to trick your brain into believing you are looking at an unvarnished eyewitness fact. Furthermore, the model zeroed in on the intense emotional volatility described in the subject's behavior. The striking detail that Jesus was a man terrible in rebuke, loving in admonition. The AI dissected this specific phrasing as a highly sophisticated form of emotional leverage. It presents a figure who holds absolute, terrifying power over the observer, yet instantly balances that terror with profound, unconditional love and tenderness. The machine highlighted how this specific psychological dynamic triggers a deep-seated human response to authority, combining fear and a desperate desire for acceptance into a single emotional experience. The text does not just describe a face, it outlines a psychological force designed to command absolute submission and devotion from anyone who reads it. The machine also flagged the profound significance of the physical perfections mentioned in the document: the smooth, unwrinkled forehead, the spotless complexion, and the perfectly formed hands. In its analytical output, the AI explained that these specific descriptors were intentionally engineered to project absolute moral purity directly onto the subject's physical body. It relies on a deeply rooted human cognitive bias known as the halo effect, where we naturally assume that individuals who possess striking physical beauty and perfect symmetry also possess flawless moral and spiritual goodness. By presenting an identity completely devoid of physical flaws, blemishes, or signs of aging, the letter subtly forces the reader's subconscious to accept that the man's soul is equally spotless and divine. What made the AI's final assessment truly chilling was its realization of its own relationship to the text. The neural network noted that, in a strange way, it shares a common ancestry with the Letter of Lentulus. Both the generative AI and the ancient forgery are complex systems built entirely out of human language, specifically designed to simulate a real human presence where one does not physically exist. The letter is a 15th-century algorithmic attempt to reconstruct a face out of words, to generate a vivid, high-resolution simulation of a historical figure to fulfill a massive cultural demand. When the modern AI looks at the document, it is essentially looking into a historical mirror, recognizing an early, non-digital version of its own ability to synthesize truth, manipulate human perception, and manufacture reality purely through the careful arrangement of syntax and text. The machine's output laid bare the raw mechanics of human longing. It showed that our minds are so eager to see what we believe that we will readily accept a cold piece of bureaucratic theater as a direct window to the divine. The forensic archive, the material science of a ghost. To truly understand how this document managed to bypass human defenses for generations, we have to look past the vocabulary and dive straight into the physical material science of medieval documentation. A text does not exist in a vacuum. It is anchored to a material reality: ink, animal skins, rag paper, and the physical pressure of a human hand holding a quill. For centuries, the Letter of Lentulus did not survive as a digital file on a server, but as a physical object hidden within the damp, dark scriptoriums of European monasteries. When we subject these surviving physical sheets to modern forensic analysis, we uncover a fascinating masterclass in how a document can be artificially engineered to project an aura of immense age. In the field of paleography, the formal study of ancient and historical handwriting, the physical script used to write a text acts as an unforgeable fingerprint. A real first-century Roman official writing an intelligence dispatch to Tiberius Caesar would have used Roman cursive scratched into wax tablets, or an early form of rustic capitals inked onto imported Egyptian papyrus. However, when we look at the oldest surviving physical copies of the Lentulus letter, they are written on heavy calfskin parchment using Gothic textualis, or early humanist minuscule, scripts that did not emerge until the High and Late Middle Ages. The physical medium completely betrays the timeline. The text was dressed up in the formal, rigid handwriting of medieval church bureaucrats, yet it was presented to the public as a raw, direct transmission from the classical world. This brings us to a compelling tension between human forensic science and modern machine learning. When a team of physical historians examines a manuscript, they use chemical analysis, ultraviolet lighting, and radiocarbon dating to analyze the degradation of the organic materials. They look at the iron gall ink corrosion on the page to determine exactly when the metal oxidized. But when you feed the digital transcription of that text into an advanced neural network like Grok, the machine performs a completely different kind of forensic analysis. The AI doesn't care about the physical ink. It conducts a structural analysis of the text's linguistic pacing and semantic density. The machine scans the distribution of syllables and the patterns of syntax, mapping the text against thousands of known authentic classical Latin texts. What the AI detects is a distinct statistical anomaly. Authentic Roman administrative documents from the 1st century are remarkably lean, transactional, and hyper-focused on logistics, legal codes, and military mechanics. They possess a high density of nouns related to taxation, topography, and civil law. The Lentulus text, by contrast, exhibits a completely different mathematical footprint. It is dense with sensory adjectives, emotional markers, and balanced rhetorical structures that mirror the devotional literature of the late medieval period. The algorithm can instantly recognize that the document is a linguistic simulation. It identifies that the text is structurally mimicking the external shell of a Roman report, while internally operating on the emotional frequencies of a medieval sermon. It is a brilliant piece of historical camouflage. The human creator of the forgery knew exactly how to make the text sound authoritative to a Renaissance reader, but they could not anticipate that centuries later, a network of silicon chips would be able to break down their writing into mathematical probabilities, instantly exposing the exact joints and seams where the imitation was glued together. This forensic realization adds a deep layer of irony to the entire narrative. The very tool we use today to analyze the letter, artificial intelligence, is itself an advanced system built to simulate human thought and generate realistic text out of data. By placing the Letter of Lentulus under the digital microscope, we are using a modern digital simulator to expose a primitive, historical, linguistic simulator. We see two entirely different eras of human engineering colliding over a single question. How do you make a fabricated statement look like an absolute, undeniable historical truth? The medieval author used the authority of a fictional Roman governor. Modern technology uses the authority of predictive data streams. Both systems rely entirely on our willingness to mistake a highly polished presentation for objective reality. The material and digital forensics do not merely debunk the text. They reveal the immense effort humanity will expend to manufacture an artifact that satisfies its own spiritual imagination. But what happens when the physical paper fades? The ink dissolves, and all that remains of this ancient portrait is the digital code running through a modern machine. The eternal need to see. The intersection of an ancient text, Renaissance art, and modern artificial intelligence brings us to a singular, undeniable realization. Humanity has an insatiable, deep-seated psychological need to see. The canonical texts of early Christianity left an agonizing visual blank space where a face should have been. The New Testament writers focused with absolute discipline on a message, an execution, and a resurrection, completely omitting details about height, eye color, or the style of a beard. This omission was not an accident. It was a profound theological choice designed to resist the ancient world's obsession with idols and physical form. Yet, the human mind struggles to worship an abstraction, and the Letter of Lentulus was manufactured to answer that collective ache. When the author of the Lentulus text sat down to forge that Roman dispatch, they were not merely engaging in a deceptive academic exercise, they were acting as a psychological physician to a culture experiencing visual starvation. They understood that if you give a person a concept, you win their mind. But if you give them a face, you capture their soul. The letter survived for centuries precisely because it acted as a perfect mirror for human longing, reflecting our deepest desires for order, beauty, and absolute moral clarity back at us. When we look at the phenomenon today through the lens of a modern neural network, the cycle comes full circle. The user who types the prompt into Grok is driven by the exact same fundamental motivation that drove the 15th century monk to copy the Lentulus manuscript by candlelight. A desperate, unyielding desire to look past the dense fog of history and witness something real. Whether we are using medieval ink or a cluster of advanced graphics processors, our goal remains identical. We are constantly trying to use our current technology to conjure a physical presence out of thin air, attempting to force the silent past to speak to us in a language we can finally understand. The haunting reality of the Lentulus Code is that it completely exposes our vulnerability to structural narrative. We want to believe so badly that when a document adopts the cold, authoritative formatting of a government report, we will gladly abandon our critical faculties to embrace the comfort of the illusion. The AI doesn't just analyze this text. It diagnoses our species as one that is profoundly lonely, continually building sophisticated linguistic machines to project our own hopes, fears, and definitions of beauty onto the empty canvas of the universe. The letter remains a masterpiece of human psychology, proving that words alone have the absolute power to shape history, command empires, and dictate exactly how billions of eyes envision the divine. If you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel for more deep dive content like this.